Okay, everybody, it's looking like we got 2 p.m. Eastern Standard, so let's go ahead and get started here. My name is Nori. I'm here to do our webinar for today. I'm joined by Jack and Josh as well.
Hello.
Hello.
And they're going to be helping me out with today's webinar, which is all about installs. So before we dive too far into the webinar, go ahead and look at some slides we got here. First off, welcome to the webinar. If this is your first time, we do these on the first Thursday of every month, and you can sign up for them for free. You can visit us at smartservice.com/webinar if you can't make it to the live broadcast, or if you want to check out some of the previous webinars. We usually make the recordings available about 24 hours after the live broadcast. So once we wrap up today here, I'll probably get started on getting that recording uploaded for you. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to ask them in the chat panel. Now, due to the number of participants that we have in these webinars, we're not going to let everybody speak live over the air, but you can ask questions through the chat panel, and we will answer those questions live over the air for you. You can see on the right side of the slide there a quick example of what that questions panel looks like. So feel free to send in a question. I do want to get some questions from you guys and get a little bit more information about the particular installs that you do, as what we're going to be doing today is going to be fairly generic so I can satisfy everybody, but I'm happy to go into depth about, a specific topic or a portion of what we're going to be going over today if you want to see more information on it. Lastly, suggestions. What do you want us to cover next month? Let us know. At the end of the webinar, you'll be given a survey and a section where you can go ahead and request the next month's topic. These webinars are driven by you guys. You're the ones deciding what topics we're going to be going over. So make sure to vote on these. Let me know what you want. They're basically free training classes, and you get all three trainers in them. So it's definitely worth the while to go ahead and vote for something and see what we can come up with for you. Also, did you know about our weekly QA webinars? Those are a little bit of a different flavor than today's webinar. Today's webinar is going to go over a very specific topic of installation process. The weekly QA webinars can go over anything. You can also talk live over the air directly with the trainer, interact with us, ask us questions, have us walk you through different things and stuff like that. Those are on Wednesdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can join those at smartservice.com/knowledge base right on the front page there. It's got the free sign up link, and they work very similar to this webinar. You get an invitation through your email. You join just like you did today, gets you in there. But let's go ahead and get started with what we're talking about today. So the first thing that I want to highlight is what we're going to define as an install. This could depend on what industry you're in, what kind of services you provide. I'm going to use the term install a little bit loosely. Here's basically what I'm describing as an installation. Usually, they're going to start with a quote for a new piece of equipment or some other major service. You're going to quote somebody on it because it's a high dollar item or service. Typically, they last a full day or more. Some of you might get everything done in one day. Some of you might need a couple people to get it done in a day, or you might need a couple days to get a couple people out there to do something. And we can't install, a big furnace or something like that in one day, usually, unless we're there all day. We might need to come back or be there a couple days, depending on, what issues might pop up in the process. So usually take a couple days. Multiple technicians or groups of technicians. We see this quite often, at least if you have like a supervisor or something like that. Again, on these kind of high dollar value items, usually you send a couple people out or someone to at least come by and check all the work and make sure things were done properly and all the boxes are ticked and everything else. You may need a sales order to lock in purchases, and we'll talk about the difference between sales orders and purchase orders. Purchase orders help you order materials. You might require a couple checks and balances to make sure that service goes well. Again, you might send out a supervisor. It might go through a few people in the office. Usually larger company installs are going to be something that you guys have, the project manager look over, and then you have your accounts receivable person look over, maybe a service manager look over. There's a couple different sets of eyes that are on the work order there to make sure everything got done properly and that everything is ready for reporting. Again, how you invoice for these services may be different. You might use progress invoicing. You might collect deposits or use sales orders. We're going to be getting into where those play into the smart service process here today and how we work with QuickBooks to achieve those things. So let's go and outline a process here for this webinar. I'll give everybody a second to go ahead and look over this chart. Starting on the left, we are going to create a quote where they're going to convert that quote into a work order. So the customer says yes, and they want to do the work. We turn it into a work order. At that point, you might have materials you need to order. We're going to get their new furnace or whatever the item is that we need to purchase. in order to actually do the work. We're going to talk about receiving those materials because that's a process that you need to take as well. You can't just order it, you got to get it, and maybe it gets dropped off at the customer, maybe it gets dropped off at your office, and you got to figure out which job this unit goes to. Then we're going to go ahead and hopefully schedule it because we want to start doing the work once we get the materials and we're ready to go. And then we're going to split off into two different sections there, the top section there and the bottom section. So going across the top section first, usually you schedule it and you go to perform that work right away. We review the project and then we send the invoice to the customer. We're going to refer to that as kind of the standard invoice process. Basically, you invoice at the time of completion, and that should end in job costing. Very big topic that I want to be talking about here later today. Get you some more information on job costing. Going down the bottom row, you might do progress invoicing. We're going to talk about what progress invoicing is, how it helps your customers. We'll move over to performing the work there, and just kind of intermittently, really, you should have progress invoicing in there a few times. If you're billing a portion of the service at a time as you're performing the work, you're still going to want to review the project though. We just don't have that final invoice section. If you're doing progress invoicing, you just continue to do that until the amount is paid. But even that should end at job costing. So that is how we're going to be going throughout the webinar today. Again, your process might differ a little bit, and that's okay. Just let me know, if you guys do something a little bit differently, or if there's something else you want to see added into this process, or go into a little bit more depth on that subject. Now, with that note, let me show you a few other slides just to kind of define some of these steps that we're going to be going through. So with the same graphic here, I highlighted a few different portions. Let's go ahead and start with the quoting process. So that whole create a quote, convert a quote. Well, it's not really that simple, right? You might have a phone call. You might set up some time to go visit the customer. If it's a really big customer, it might take them to lunch or something like that. You're probably going to have other sorts of correspondences, sales reps, other reports that you want to look in there for. You might send the quote a few times. You might want to report on, how close we are to closing the gap on some of these items, what our win-loss ratio is. There's a bunch of stuff going on with quotes. I wanted to keep today's webinar specifically about installation process. And this is just one of those portions of the installation process. If you want a full webinar on how you can use quotes in Smart Service, you can visit smartservice.com/webinar and check out that sales pipeline webinar I mentioned at the bottom. Before we do continue though, one thing that I won't be touching on too much today, but I do want you to know, and this is addressed in that webinar I mentioned, in the quoting process, you can start from Smart Service, iFleet, or QuickBooks, really depends. I'm gonna start from Smart Service if we're taking it from the office. If maybe I go out there to repair something and it's just, cheaper, better, smarter for you to get a new, more efficient unit than fix your old bus step, whatever it is, we can start this process from iFleet. For people that don't schedule it at all and don't want anything to do with the Smart Service quoting process, you can create estimates in QuickBooks, and we can show you how to import those estimates into work orders in Smart Service when the customer is ready to do the work. But again, really up to you. If you want to use our merchant service features for collecting deposits, or if you're going to visit the customer, take some measurements, take some photos and stuff like that during the quoting process, we'd say go ahead and start off in Smart Service, and Smart Service can still make that estimate in the background in QuickBooks for you. Which I'll show you today. So the estimate will end up in QuickBooks either way. That's just good reporting. It's really going to help out with job costing. But if you want to go visit the customer, probably start in Smart Service. The next portion in that graphic I gave you there was the purchase order process. Again, I want to lightly cover all of these sections here, making our way towards the install, but I did want to provide an avenue to get more information on some of these features. Over at the smartservice.com/webinar site is the 2016 enhancements webinar. We spend the first half of that webinar talking about purchase orders, why purchase orders work the way they do in Smart Service, how that translates over to QuickBooks. We will see that process today, but again, specifically under getting parts for our installation. So we're not going to get too far in depth in that, but you can create purchase orders, item receipts, and vendor bills in QuickBooks, all from Smart Service. So we'll walk through a little bit of that and show you kind of a back and forth between how that works. The other thing I will not be talking about today, but I did want to mention in here, you can create purchase orders via iFleet as well. That does not give your technicians the ability to charge things to your account and stuff like that with this particular vendor. You'd have to, give them a credit card to give them access to that account separately, but they can create a purchase order, say, hey, I need this stuff. If you let them go to the store and pick up stuff, they have that company card or something like that. They can tell you that they did that, but you don't contact the vendor through iFleet. It's really to make a glorified shopping list. Let me get over to that standard invoicing process. So again, we're going to define two different types of invoicing today. That's standard invoicing and progress invoicing. Standard can be basically billing upon completion. This is a path that we will take inside of Smart Service here. We're going to do a few days of work, 1, 2, 3, however many days it takes to get the job done. And then we're going to go ahead and create an invoice that will get sent over to the customer and sent over to QuickBooks. If you want more information on scheduling multi-day services, a little bit of which we'll go into today, you can go ahead and head over to smartservice.com/webinar, and there's a multi-day jobs webinar that has what we call diagnose and repair services, that has the install process, that has batch invoicing in it, a few different ways for you to generate an invoice from Smart Service, and what the appropriate timings and steps would be. We're also going to be talking a little bit about customized installation checklists today. I'm not going to go over how to build those, but I will mention them. You're going to want some sort of documentation to prove that you did the install and you did it right. So you should definitely check out those checklists or PDF forms via iFleet. Again, if you go over to smartservice.com/webinar, you can check that out under the title PDF integration. And then lastly, progress invoicing. So this isn't a feature yet in Smart Service, but it is a QuickBooks feature, and it's something that we do keep in mind and work with. What a progress invoice would be is, let's say, you get a big job, it's $8,000 or something like that. I don't have $8,000. I don't know about you, but I definitely don't have $8,000 to just hand out. So I might have you bill me every 30 days, a portion of that. I'm going to kind of pay into the final project while you guys are doing the work. Well, that's what the progress invoicing is going to be. So we'll take a look at how that works in QuickBooks. But not a feature yet in Smart Service. However, we do work with it, and I'll show you how to get to that in QuickBooks. If you want to look at more about that, you can go to the QuickBooks link at the bottom there and just search progress invoicing. That is the terminology they're going to use. It's available for QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. And then lastly, the job costing process. We don't see many customers doing this. And really, it seems like one of the most important parts of the process. If you can't tell me how well you did on the install, how much money you made, where we might have lost some money, where we might have got nickel and dimed to death because we, lost some tools, or I've seen companies that go through, 5 rolls of paper towels on a job where they really just need like one or a couple trash bags, and all those little amounts add up. Mistakes, breaking things that we need to install, those add up. You want to keep that stuff in mind. You want to keep track of it. Smart Service is going to do a lot to help you with this. We can send the quote to QuickBooks, the final invoice to QuickBooks. That way you can compare, do an estimate versus actual later. Your job costs, so how much things cost you to purchase, is on there. Your purchase orders, of course, are part of that. Vendor bills. Your employee times. If we quoted this as being a 6-hour job, and we got 2 guys that spent 5 hours each, well, that's kind of a big deal. We probably want to talk to our salesman and say, hey, that's really a 10-hour job, not a 6-hour job. Let's go ahead and quote that a little bit higher next time, just so we're not eating the cost of that installation. But there are things big and small. Like I said, it could be misquoted time on the job. We thought it would be much shorter, and that's barring a purchase order or something, or not a purchase order, a change order or something like that. Or in the case of, little things, like I said, people are breaking off drill bits or something like that, and we seem to have a guy that runs through 10 drill bits a job. That's a big deal. Those do add up if he's doing a couple jobs every day. We probably want to talk to that guy and see what's going on, or maybe get him some better tools. Again, if you're interested in a full breakdown of job costing, go over to smartservice.com/webinar. There's a webinar called Job Costing. You can get more information, in my opinion, out of a more recent article that we wrote over at smartservice.com/knowledge base. It's called Job Costing. It's got some links to QuickBooks. One thing I do want to make clear on the note of job costing and why we're not getting into it too far today, Smart Service collects data for job costing. We will send that data to QuickBooks. We do not do job costing in Smart Service, though. There's profitability as kind of like an estimated profit margin on jobs, but really you should do your job costing in QuickBooks. We're just looking at the total of your items in there. That's what the features are intended to be. You can fudge it a little bit and make it more accurate, but we're not taking into account the mileage, the wear and tear of your vehicle, liabilities, your licenses, all that stuff. You're just not going to see that stuff in Smart Service, but you will see it in QuickBooks. Since we filter everything down to the job level in QuickBooks for you, everything's already in there. It's just needing to be assembled. We'll get out all the ingredients for you, but you're going to have to build the cake yourself in QuickBooks using those job costing features. but they got some great stuff over there. It's stuff that we all work with here, so I would definitely recommend checking that stuff out. But okay, so that takes care of all the intro stuff. We're going to go ahead and get started on the webinar itself now. With that being said, if you have questions, ask them in the questions panel. Me, Jack, and Josh will keep an eye on that kind of as we go along here and get some of those questions answered live over the air. But let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to head over to Smart Service here. Okay, so we are here. We're going to start here on the schedule. Now, our first goal is to quote this customer on a new installation. I'm going to go ahead and do a furnace system for today. Something simple, easy, something we can all relate to. Everybody's probably got a furnace. With that being said, you might schedule your quotes. You might do them from the office. That's really up to you. If you're going to schedule a quote, then go ahead and start from the scheduling board for the scheduler. Just highlight some time, right click, and you got an option. Now, mine says new estimate. You can change this depending on what your preferences are in settings. So you might pick out, let me head over there to settings in the estimate section. You might pick out a different terminology. So you have the option to do that. And again, there's more settings in here for what everything should see. You could check out our settings webinar for that. But yours might say something different is my point. But I could start here, or I could go to the customer and create it from there. Again, if I'm creating from the schedule, I'm scheduling it first. If I create it from the customer, I'm going to figure out some details and then schedule it. I'm going to go from the customer for hours, just so I can show you the other way to do things. So we'll go to Lisa. And to create something for Lisa, I'm going to go into locations and jobs. And here we'll notice we have the option to add an estimate here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit add estimate. It's going to go ahead and let me name that estimate. I'm going to say that looks good. If you haven't done the estimate process before in Smart Service, it works very similar to the job. You come in here and you put in a job type. I'm going to say installation, new furnace, keep it simple. I don't need to adjust the invoicing style for this. There are, of course, options, but for this one, immediate invoicing for the job is great if you're on QuickBooks Desktop. If you're on QuickBooks Online, yours will default to this customer/location, but you really shouldn't use the batch features. We do talk about in that webinar, if you're in a construction industry and your jobs are going to take, 3 or 4 months before the install is really done, that's a different story. But if you're installing like a new equipment or something like that, immediate invoicing is going to be the way to go. So we'll get that on there. We could put in our notes if we had notes. We want to get to the estimate items, however. So with the estimate items here, I'm going to go ahead and add some items. So I'm going to add a new furnace. And we're going to need some stuff for the furnace. We're going to need a filter for it. Let me see here. We're going to add in, and let me run a get list real quick to bring over our thermostat item. We're going to need one of those. Again, these items do come from QuickBooks. So I'm going to go ahead and run a get list real quick. Got some new items here to help with our demonstrations. Let me go ahead and pull those in. There we go. So let's head back in there. There's a thermostat. And I am not a HVAC tech or an electrician really, but I know that we're going to need a couple things, a couple electrical things to wire that in. Okay, so now I've got a decent list of the products I need. We do need one more thing though. Of course, we have to charge for labor to install these. So let's go and add that in as well. All right, and we'll use standard labor for this. Now again, this is my quote. This is the idealized version of what I think I need. I've got the descriptions in here and everything else. I probably want to go ahead and assign inventory sites to all these. If I want to pull these from specific inventories, you don't really need to do this until it becomes a work order. But for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and say, we're going to grab all this from the warehouse. For now, bins, I don't really need to worry about bins. But since I have QuickBooks Advanced Inventory turned on, I'll go ahead and select them. If you are interested in QuickBooks Advanced Inventory, we do have an inventory and purchase orders webinar available as well. But this is just me keeping track of where I'm going to get these parts. Some of these might be drop shipped. I probably don't have a stack of these furnaces laying around, but that'll do for now. I've got prices in here as well. for the individual items. Let's say maybe I'll need 9 hours of labor. So I can calculate that. Okay. Now, this brings up one big question that people do have, and that's I don't want my customer to see all this data. They just need to know they're getting a new furnace. They don't care about how many individual connectors and other things like that that I might add in here. Customer's not going to care about that. You can use group items in here instead. What you do with a group item, let me go over to QuickBooks. And I'm going to go into my lists. If you're in QuickBooks Online, by the way, these will be called bundles. But let's go ahead and look for furnace. So I got an item here. Let's just get a new furnace today, basically. Real simple, real easy. If you don't check this print items in group, you will be able to see these items whenever you add them to a work order, but the customer will not see them if you print it out from QuickBooks, if you send it from Smart Service. So even though we need to keep track of individual parts and all that stuff that goes along with the unit, because obviously we care about that and our technicians care about that, customer doesn't care about that, / we don't want them to care about that. So you can uncheck print items in group, and that way it's just going to show this header on the work order or anything that's customer facing. They won't see all this individual stuff that we have assigned. So you can use item groups. If you want to bring item groups into Smart Service, over here in this plus exclamation is the option to add an item group, and that'll let you search from those groups added in here. Yes, you can switch out items in the group if maybe this one's going to take something slightly different. Yes, you can change the prices and quantities of each individual component that makes up the group. So we got that taken care of, at least good enough for now from our salesman. He might have done this in iFleet as well. We could just send out a blank estimate, have them fill it out, take some photos, figure out, what we need. For the scheduling, you can only schedule one person at a time to an estimate. So we generally don't view estimates as having multiple sales reps on them. That's just not something that we envision many people doing. So it's limited to just one. But what I can do here is go ahead and schedule this. Now I could hit the magic wand to open up my calendar and schedule it to the salesman, or if I made it from the calendar, it would already be there. Some of you will do these estimates basically in the office, and you don't really need to schedule someone to go out there. I would say just schedule it to yourself. So in this case, I don't really need someone to go out there. Maybe I've already been there, or I'm just talking over the phone to the person. I'll just pick out today and pick out myself from the list. That's good enough there to satisfy Smart Services requirement of having something scheduled. You don't need to add a completion date or anything else. But this is good here. A few things I wanted to mention before we get too far away from the estimate itself. There is a correspondence section here. You might upload some photos, things that you take in iFleet pictures and stuff like that will show up in here as well. But if you're happy with that, you could send it to the customer, or I'm going to show you another way to do that. If you save and close an estimate and maybe we need to fill out more data or something like that, over here in Office is a screen that I want to see more people using, and that's this Estimate Center. This is designed for people that maybe don't know Smart Service too well. They're sales reps. They don't really care about what's going on back in the office on the computer, but they need a way to get in here and kind of manage the team or see what's going on. This Estimate Center is kind of an all-in-one solution for that. It's going to give you all the details and all the estimates, and there's plenty of filters to kind of work through the screen. Again, in the sales pipeline webinar, we go through all those features. But I can open up an estimate from here. So we're going to open that up, and I can go ahead and send the estimate to the customer. So I click on that. Now it's giving me this prompt here. So it's asking me how much do you want to collect. I have mine set to collect a certain percentage. I can come in here and change this. I only want to collect $500 from this customer in this case here. And what that's going to do is when I go to send the estimate to the customer, the estimate will have a link for them to pay online if you have a merchant service, and it'll collect $500 from them in this case. And then that would show up back in Smart Service in the post-payment screen in the Office. But that's how I get the estimate to them. And then, they reply to that email or one of the other options we mentioned in the sales pipeline webinar, and we eventually convert the estimate. Now I could convert it from here to a customer job at the bottom. Or if I'm in the Estimate Center, you see there's a big Convert to Customer Job button over here. What that convert stage is doing there, it's going to take this estimate, it's going to mark it as inactive, mark it as awarded, and it's going to turn it into a work order. So in Smart Service land, a customer job is a work order, as you know it. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, looks great. Customer said yes. However, they chose to say yes. It's going to give me a job name. Looks great. Then it's going to ask me this question. Do you want to make the estimate inactive? Well, yeah, I'm done with the estimate. I no longer need it as an active item in Smart Service. It can be filed away. It's not getting deleted or anything like that. Yeah, go ahead and activate it. And then I've got mine set up to ask me another question here, create estimate in QuickBooks. Do I want to have that done? Well, I want to do some job costing later. I want to know how far off the mark or how close we were for this estimate that I'm creating. So I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and create that in QuickBooks. I can also have it create a sales order for me there as well. By the way, and I do see a lot of people doing it, a sales order is not really a work order in QuickBooks. A sales order is a consent to purchase goods. It's something you'd have your customer sign and say, yes, please purchase these goods on my behalf. Kind of locks them in to, not leaving you guys on the hook if they change their mind after you start ordering materials and everything else. So you have that option there, but I've created a work order. Okay, great. It's got the notes, it's got the items and all that stuff that we had on the estimate. Now, what do I want to do with the scheduling? Well, I got to get those parts still. I'm probably going to put this on the waiting list. And I'm going to say waiting on parts, and then we got to go order some parts here. So I know it'll end up there. It's going to take a day or two for me to get these items. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the purchase order section here. And that all starts in job items. One other thing I want to point out, if you create estimates in QuickBooks, if you prefer doing it that way instead, you don't want to worry about Smart Service estimates, that's totally fine too. Just create a job. It won't have anything in it like this, but by running Get Estimates up here, we click that button and we click in here to look at our different estimates, and you can see the different ones we've got in QuickBooks. This will import the line items from that estimate into this work order. So if you're creating QuickBooks, not a problem. You can go ahead and import it in there. Let me go ahead and see. Okay. So we've got that taken care of here. Well, let's go ahead and order some materials. I'm going to use this purchase orders and billable items button. So we're going to click on that. Now, maybe you create a purchase order in QuickBooks, or the purchasing manager has already done that. You can go ahead and just run it, update POs. As long as it's tied to this work order or this job in QuickBooks, we'll be able to see it here. This button will basically run that check just for this here. George says he does not have an option to create a PO in Smart Service. George, you have probably chosen not to generate jobs from Smart Service to QuickBooks. The purchase order feature is going to be job specific. So if you've disabled the ability for Smart Service to create jobs in QuickBooks via your settings, and usually people do that if they have QuickBooks Pro and Premier, then you would not be able to create purchase orders in Smart Service. You can still do so inside of QuickBooks and still assign it to the customer as a whole. But it's kind of difficult to run job costing and other things like that to a specific job if we don't have that job record and all you're giving me is the customer. So that's probably why you don't have that option there. You can call Smart Service help desk and get that checked out there, George. Looks like you said, yeah, so you can create jobs. Are you creating them in Smart Service and then seeing them in QuickBooks? They should look like, I don't know if you have QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online, but you should have like this. Like, see, I got all these jobs. I've got the customer, and then I've got these indented guys that are all the jobs here. So if you're seeing that in QuickBooks, you should have the purchase order functionality. If you're not seeing this for any of your customers, then you probably have that disable jobs option turned off or turned on in that case. But yeah, contact the support team. We'll get you taken care of. Okay, let's make our PO. So I'm going to hit new. Now, I don't want to select all the items from that PO again, or from the work order again. I could go through here and pick out all my stuff, but I don't want to really do that. I'm going to go ahead and select the vendor. Say we're ordering this stuff from Global Air, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the select job items button over here on the right. So this option here, and it looks like we might be having a problem with it. This option here should give you guys the individual items from the work order. Let me go ahead and see what we got going on with that. That's not making it do that. Go ahead and delete it and try again here. All our items are active, so they should be showing up. Let's go ahead and select our items first. There we go. So I get my items in here now. Obviously, I can't buy labor. That'll come from my technicians, but I'm going to say these items I'm going to order. Go ahead and hit that. I'll have our team look into why you can't select the vendor first. That looks like a problem on our side, but we'll go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to buy it from this vendor. Now I can change this if I want to change like quantities and how many I'm getting from each place and all that stuff. And of course, you're free to make multiple purchase orders. I didn't have to select all the items like that. So we're going to go ahead and just say, let's just get these. So we get that. We go ahead and hit save. And it's going to take a moment here, and it's going to create that purchase order over in QuickBooks. This process, again, will take a little while depending on how big your database is, how much stuff you got over there. But we see we've got that PO in there. If I go over to QuickBooks and we head over to our home page, you can get to this with the PO screen, but I'm going to take the easy way. We're going to head over here to purchase orders. And what I want you to see, if I go back one, is that I've created that purchase order in QuickBooks. It is tied to that work order, so that's going to help out with job costing. So I'm creating this for your team in the background. Your accounting person will be able to see this. So we get that going, and we'd probably go ahead and park this thing on the waiting list like we did earlier. Save and close it. So where do we find that later? Maybe it takes a couple days to get those parts in. You can do it from the scheduler. Down here, there's an option to view waiting list. Now you can do this for work orders and for estimates, depending on what you got going on. But in here, we can see what's going on. So these are installs I'm waiting on, which one. So we know we're doing the new furnace one. We can see why it's waiting. You might include some other information in here as well. If I go ahead and hit the column customize option, I want to grab that internal PO because I'm eventually going to get a box with a purchase order number on it, and I want to know where that belongs. So let's go and put that in there. All right. So now I can see, oh, okay, if I get a PO with 1509, I know which job it goes to. Again, you can customize those columns and make them whatever you want. You can also see how long an item has been waiting. So we can see if it's been, a week. You can tell, obviously, some of these guys I should probably get back to at some point. But now we see the item. We see everything's good to go. We got a purchase order. I'm going to go ahead and open up the work order. And inside of the work order here, we're going to go over to job items. And I'm going to go ahead and hit on purchase orders again. And I'm going to choose to receive a purchase order this time. So we're going to go and click on that. Then it's going to ask me, okay, do you want to receive this with a bill or without a bill? This choice is up to you. With a bill, meaning that the vendor is charging you, you have your invoice from the vendor. Without a bill is much more common. Usually they're going to, especially if you're a business, they're going to send you the parts well in advance of them sending the invoice. Maybe you, even yourself out in your account with them once a month or something like that. But usually it takes a few days. It's not usually instant. So I can say, okay, let's receive it with a bill this time. Let's say we got one. I can put in a reference number for the bill if I want. And then I can say, okay, where am I going to receive these items? Maybe this one got shipped to the customer. I make drop ship as an option. But I'm going to say all these are going to land in the warehouse first. And maybe I only got 10 of these, or I got a few of something else. I can go ahead and change these quantities and say I received some of these. I can uncheck them entirely if I got a box with the first 3 things in it, but not the rest. So I get those choices here. And I can go and hit save. Then it's going to ask me, do you want to add these received items to the job? Well, if you didn't have any line items in here yet, then I would say, yeah, add to job, and it'll put all the stuff in here for you. We already did that work, so I'm going to hit no. I don't need it to add them again. And then it's going to go ahead and create an item receipt in QuickBooks and create a vendor bill in QuickBooks since I told it to that time. Item receipt just lets you know you got the parts. The vendor bill lets you know you need to pay for the parts. We have the billable items section in here. So maybe if you made a mistake and you wanted to add one of these to the job, you can just hit add job. Otherwise, you can leave them set in here. If it bothers you, you can remove them from the list. We already have them on the work order either way, so we're in good shape. We can close out of that. Okay. So we've got our products and services on here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and specify what bins they all went to, and how you guys have this sorted out might be a little different for you. I don't have any of these actually in inventory. Oh, we got some there. We're gonna buy some of those, order some of those in there. Fantastic. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and schedule this out. I want to go into scheduling. Now I can take it off the waiting list here by unchecking it. Or if I'm on the calendar over here, I could click and drag, highlight the job, or right click on the job on the waiting list anywhere in any of the columns and say move from waiting list to selected time, and that would schedule it for me. Whichever way you guys choose to go is up to you. I'm going to do mine from within the job because I want to do a few extra things with it. So I'm going to take it off the waiting list, get my magic wand, schedule it. It's going to open up my calendar. It's going to look just like my big calendar here. So I got all the same options. Nori is available today, so let's go ahead and get him out there. Let's say we'll start him at 8 a.m. We'll just drag down. It's gonna be there all day to get the furnace done. Save it. Okay, day one is scheduled. Hey, that might be the end of your install, depending on how big your installations are. Otherwise, you might come in here and you might add multiple days to the job. You might add helpers to the job. I want to go ahead and talk about how these options work together because there are some tricky parts in this process. So let's just say we just need Nori, maybe 2 days, 3 days. We can go ahead and do custom dates. And then we can choose what days those are. I'm going to go out today. I'm going to go out tomorrow. And I'm going to go out Friday or Monday. And that will put those dates in here. Now, it's going to send this one to me first. And then I'm going to complete that date. That'll come back to the office. They'll review it, close it out. And then the next date from the list will pop up in there, and so on and so forth. Again, in the multi-date jobs webinar over at smartservice.com/webinar, we go through this process a little bit more. But that's the basics. You can also adjust the individual times. Maybe the second day, they got a dentist appointment in the morning, so they won't be there to let us in. We'll start at 11 or something like that. I can go ahead and say, okay, we can do 11 to, I don't know, 5 on that day. And maybe it won't even be me. Maybe I need to have Jack go out there and do something. Jack's got a special skill of, whatever that Jack can do in there. He can go ahead and do that, and then I can come back out and finish. So we can do it this way. And then this basically creates 3 individual dates that we will review, complete review, and then close out until we get to the final day where we'll do the invoicing. So that's one way to do it. You might also have a helper. It's going to take both me and Josh in this case to get the job done. I can go ahead and select Josh here. And then there's me and Josh on the work order. The way that Josh gets added in here is basically as a ride along. He's going to be in the car with me. He's going to be there the same times that I am. If Josh is using iFleet, Josh will get the work order on iFleet as well. But the tricky thing with additional employees, Josh can't just come help me for an hour in this case. Josh is there all day when I do that. Same thing with if I come in here and I add multiple days to this. It's adding Josh to these 2 days as well. So Josh is now out there all 3 days. Some of the time that works out, but people get sick, bigger jobs come by, things happen. That might not always be the smartest way to handle things, especially on installs, or if you have, teams that are going to do different things, it'd be kind of in and out. Another way to handle these is going to be with let's get rid of our additional employee. By the way, that additional employee will put that job on the schedule for that other person as well. So you'll see a visual representation of that on the calendar. But what's usually popular is coming in here, doing custom dates. And we've already got December 1st for Nori on there, but I'm going to add December 1st again. And I'm going to change this over to Jack. And I'm going to do the same thing for the second. I'm going to add it twice. And then on that one, I'm going to add Josh, but only for a few of the hours. When you do it like this, it's still going to process these dates sequentially. But if iFleet can see at least a day or 2 in advance, they will see all these jobs. So Nori will get this job, and then it's going to create basically a separate instance of that job here for Jack, another one for Nori, and another one for Josh. Basically, these 3 technicians are working independently now, whereas the first time we did additional employees, I was kind of the crew leader, and then these guys were helping me. Now they can all be out there for whatever amount of time. Jack can be out there for a different amount of time than I am. He will have his own complete button and everything else. He'll basically be his own lead tech, whereas these guys are, kind of helper techs. Some people will schedule things like this. It will create some extra steps in the posting process, which we'll talk about, but you can do it like this here, just to kind of alleviate some of the scheduling conflicts and make things a little bit more flexible. Maybe you need someone out there just for an hour or 2 to get the old unit out, and then I can, install most of the new one myself once it's moved down to the basement or wherever it's going. So for hours, we're going to do custom dates. I'm going to make mine real simple. We'll just say it's just me today and tomorrow, make it easy. But we go ahead and get it scheduled up. Now we're good to go ahead and start doing the work. So I'm going to save and close that. And then that gets dispatched out to the technician. So now we can go ahead and do that. we're going to stop there for a second. I do want to see if there are any questions about what I've done so far, just to get things out the door, basically, and then I'm going to dive into progress invoicing. But I'm going to go ahead and take a sip of coffee real quick. You guys let me know if there's something about anything that we've talked about so far that you wanted to ask about. And just a reminder for Stephanie there. Hey, Stephanie, you can't do the raise hand stuff in this webinar because of the number of people that we have, but feel free to write in a question. Use the questions panel. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen. Write in something. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Also, Brian, yes, thank you for the compliment there. I'm glad you're enjoying the information. Yeah, Stephanie, just write out your question. We'll take a look at it for you. But all right, while Stephanie's ready got that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about progress invoicing. Let's head over to QuickBooks. This is something that happens in QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online. I'm going to go ahead and show you where you need to enable it in QuickBooks Desktop. If we go into Preferences, I think it's in Jobs and Estimates. Yeah, so you got do you create estimates and do you create progress invoicing. You want to have this on, otherwise you're not going to see the option that I'm going to show you here. So that's important that these settings are both on. But once they are on, if you go over to a estimate in QuickBooks, let's see, this is the one we just did. And again, you don't do both types of billing at the same time like that. That's not going to be a good idea. You want to bill in one way or the other. But inside of here, you've got an option when you hit create invoice to do the progress invoicing. So I can create an invoice for the entire estimate. That's basically just billing them all at once. I probably want to do it invoice for the percentage of an estimate, and I can go ahead and say, hey, let's do 25% at a time. Somebody would come through QuickBooks every so often, bill, 25%, 25%, 25%, 25% until we get everything paid off. One thing that QuickBooks will limit you on, especially if you have inventory turned on or on your estimates, can't do progress invoicing for them. The logic in QuickBooks there, I know that can be frustrating. Why can't I do progress invoicing when I'm doing inventory? Well, for QuickBooks, when you put an item on an invoice, it's taking out of inventory. You can't really take a quarter of a light bulb out of inventory, is going to be the example they usually use. So if you're doing progress invoicing, it does need to be service items. Some people will create a separate invoice that's just for the service items, just to generate the progress billing for it, and that's fine. You just do one item that is 25, 28 in our case for the total. And then you have this one for actually doing the job costing and stuff like that later. That's okay. Just make sure you don't keep both estimates over time. But that's a way to get around it, is just create a simple service invoice with that total and do your progress bills and then get rid of it before you do your costing. But you have the option to do this progress invoicing. Again, super helpful, but I'll show you how we do bill at time of completion through Smart Service. So I'm going to go ahead and stop on that because we're going to come back and use this actual estimate for something later. Okay, at this point, Nori is going to go out there and he's going to go ahead and do the work. I did want to talk a little bit about how we review these jobs, the exceptions, the timestamps, the forms, the checklists, all that stuff. You're going to have a lot going on in this process, and the bigger the job, obviously, the more you're going to have going along. But let me go ahead and take a look at an audience question here. Let's see, Mavis said, when you do the additional dates and technicians, do we have to generate more than one work order? No, it's all one work order, Mavis. It's kind of a weird thing. Let me show you. So we've got the work order today, right? This big blue one that's on me on the right-hand side. And that is Aberdeen Lisa 1955. If I go to, what was it, Friday we scheduled the next visit? It's the same work order. So when you do a multi-day service using custom dates or any of the other recurring patterns, it's the same work order. You can have it result in individual invoices per day, or you can have one invoice at the end. For this process here where we're doing an installation, I don't want to be billed every single day. I want to be billed once at the end. And that's what I'm going to be showing you today. But for like a recurring, a filter change or something, you're going to go visit the house quarterly or something like that. Those recurrence patterns are all the same job. It's just multiple instances of that job, and each one can be billed separately or in a batch or together. There's a ton of options there. If you watch the multi-day jobs webinar, It'll go over more of that stuff. But yes, good question. It's one job though. It's just multiple scheduled dates in one job. Okay, so I want to go ahead and talk about what happens when Nori goes out there and does the work. So obviously I'm not going to jump on my tablet and do all that stuff, but while I'm filling out this job as the technician would, I do want to talk about a few items that are going to happen on the process. So Nori is going to complete day 1 of the service. Again, just day 1, we're not completing both days. He's going to go out there and do this. This happens when iFleet says they're done for the day. The other thing that I want them to do is under my job fields, I am going to have them add job exceptions here, regardless of what happens. I have ones that are work incomplete and work complete. So on multi-day jobs is where this is useful. We're going to need a way to tell the office who isn't out there on the job site that, hey, we need more time on this job. Hey, this is a multi-day service. We're going to need some way for the technician or the project manager on site to indicate to our office, don't bill for this yet. We're not done. Or maybe there's a change order or something else is going on that's really important. Let's see here. Brian said, are you going to review posting of this job today? Yes, I am, Brian. That's what we're working towards here. But we're going to go through a few things first. So Nori is going to add this for us for now, and I'll show you where to make more of those, and you can customize, and I'll show you why I'm doing that way. The other thing he's going to add is probably some timestamps. Now, you could have these for multiple texts. And again, these get added from iFleet, but we're just going to go ahead and just put in something for now. Let's say 8. Maybe I got a late start there, 8:03. And as expected, I ran all the way to 5, but I like to go home. So I ended right at 5 there. We'll go ahead and put in Nori. We're going to go ahead and put in production. And you'd have travel and production and all that stuff. The reason why this matters is really this payroll item for job costing. You can set this up in Smart Service for QuickBooks Desktop, has payroll items. QuickBooks Online, unfortunately, does not have the capability to do payroll items like this. They have a payroll service rather than like a payroll management suite thing. But a good part of job costing is getting this information down so that I know, hey, I spent however many hours of this money for Nori, because his cost on the job is going to be very important when we're talking about, quoting hours and making sure we're staying above board on getting things done. But we'll put in his time, so we got that. Okay, so that's really everything he did. Maybe take some pictures or something like that. He'll probably fill out forms and checklists and other things. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close this, and let's get to that review step now that that is complete. To review any of these work orders, you're going to do the same process you've been doing. Go into Office, and inside of Office, at the bottom left, I've got a section with 4 options there, and one says Post Work Orders. Yours might say something different, depending on what you guys set up in Smart Service. Mine says Post Work Orders, so we're going to go in there. And we can see a couple different things I got going on there. Now, this is where the job exception helps out. This tells me, as the office person, what's going on out there. So this is an ongoing project. Okay, so that tells me they're not done with work yet. And again, you can use whatever terminology you want. I made a very simple, very direct one. The technician puts this on to say, hey, I'm going to need another day. And we're probably going to want to go into the job by clicking on it. And let's go ahead and, maybe it's got some notes in here. If you filled out a checklist, I'll show you that here in a minute. That would be here. But since we need another day, let's make sure he's got another day. Yeah, okay, so we're good. He's got another day on there. That's already planned out. We'll go ahead and close out this date and send the next date to him, let him get out there, do it again, and then we'll see what he says. But I can see that information from here. I do also want to check on a few other things that might happen. Again, if you use the checklist feature, and I can access it here from Smart Service, this is basically a text-based checklist that you can do. If I come in here, I can go ahead and grab one. I'm just going to grab this generic one. What this does, though, is it lets your technicians or you in the office click on these, and you can set up options for what you want it to say. So it's asking me, okay, did you inform the customer safety information? I could say, yeah, I did that. Did we shut off the power before we start working on anything? Yeah, we checked the breakers. Did we do this and that? And I can just kind of keep going through. You can have these be short answer as well. So that choice is really yours. But we can go through and, have our guys answer all these questions. This one's just like a generic. They can write in whatever they want. But when you do save to job, it's going to add those answers in here for you. So you can have your technician go through, fill out a checklist, answer yes and no to all the items. You can create checklists from that button as well. We have a great article at smartservice.com/knowledge base about that. If you instead wanted to complete a form out in Smart Service, great. If you go over to the customer level, you can go to History and Documents, and you can switch this over to Documents. This is going to show you any of those signed fillable forms that you might have filled out in the field. So I can look at Nori's form here, and again, you can customize these to have them look however you want. This is just an example one that's going to pop up here. But if we had certain steps we needed to complete or something like that, we can go ahead and see those steps and make sure, okay, he missed some stuff. Why did he miss that? We can do whatever you want here. You can put photos and everything else. So you can get a customized form to make sure that somebody is properly documenting the process, or you can do the quick and easy thing, which is doing one of these checklists. A lot of people will also, I'm gonna bring it up as an option, in the individual job items, you can make user-defined fields for the job items. So if you had specific things you want to talk about on this furnace item, notice there's also the checklist button here. If you want a checklist per item specifically, you can do that. So you guys have a lot of options and a lot of room to play with those. Before we post our job, one more thing I wanted to talk about was we're going to add those job exceptions. The job exception being this guy in red here that tells me what to do next in the office. Those got added from settings under user fields. This is, by the way, where you go to add like the job item, user defined fields and all that stuff. But I'm going to do job exceptions. This is where that list comes from. So again, I've got a couple in here specifically for installs. Maybe something goes wrong and the technician adds this one. Hey, look at the notes. We need to change order this or that. Things are going okay, but we need more time. And of course, this thing's done and ready to go. So we've got some options there, and you make up these. You'll have a separate list from me. But what's important here is that you go and review the job as you need to. You come in here and you look at the notes, you look at the items, make sure everything's going good there. You can filter the screen by job type. So if you're only looking for installations, you can use your job type filter up here. This completed date, everybody gets confused about this their first time. This is how this specific date of service went, not how the whole job went. So we're just talking about that one day. Now, if you need to reschedule, there's no reschedule option in here. You want to open up the job and reschedule, or maybe move it back to the waiting list, if we got to get more parts, or the part we got is faulty or something like that. We can see the times we gave the tech to do it, the date they actually did it, and really important is this time value. Make sure to come in here. Make sure everybody's listed in here. Maybe some of the other guys didn't put in timestamps. You can hit add like I did earlier to add them. If you just need a quick add, just hit this duplicate button over here. And you can just change it to whoever else. So maybe Jack was supposed to be out there. Now I want to watch that payroll item because you see it took that away because I don't have that listed properly on Jack's account, but I could go ahead and add in Jack's an hourly employee. So we can modify timestamps, and you can come in here and change them too, of course. So you have that option, but we'll say that's good. Close it out. Now we got a proper time on there. And then we see its custom date pattern. Good, because it's a multi-day job. Now I want to go ahead and post it, but wait. There's something you need to know before you hit this post button. With the post button, when you click that, it does three things all at once. First, it's going to make a history record. So there will be a history record under the customer for December 1st. That's going to tell me what happened December 1st, show me everything that had to do with December 1st. The second thing it's going to do is advance the job to the next date of service if there is one. If not, it's going to inactivate the job because it's going to assume that we are done if we're not telling it we need to go back out later. That's why it was important for us to open up the job, double check, make sure there is another date on there. The last thing it's going to do is try to make an invoice in QuickBooks. It's assuming you want a one-day job. That's how most jobs are, but not for installs. That's different. We're going to need a couple days, and I want to bill them little by little by little. So what I'm going to do before I hit this button is I'm going to tell Smart Service up here at the top middle, do not invoice. By checking this box, it will still make the history record. It will still advance the job to the next date of service, but it will not invoice the work order. So it's just going to leave the items on there. The items will remain as they are, and just roll it over to the next section the next day. So I'm going to go ahead and hit post. Now that we have do not invoice checked, and I know to do that because it's an ongoing project, and I verified that there are no problems, but we do need more time, and I verified there is more time on there. I'm going to go ahead and post it. So that disappears from my list. Life moves on. Nori goes out the next day, completes the work order. So now I'm going to have him go out there again. And the same thing is going to happen. You're going to go ahead and put in times on the work order. You're going to go ahead and put in photos and exceptions and stuff like that. One additional option I have seen customers use that I want to mention here is in job items. If you have a lot of job items and your technicians get confused on which items they need to be installing on a particular day, if you just want to give them a few of these items at a time, have them all in here. I'm going to unlock my job items so I can mess with them. But you can click up here where it says active, and you can check or uncheck all. If items are inactivated, iFleet doesn't see them. But I could say, okay, well, they did the furnace that day, so that's in there. They don't need to see that again. I mean, I hope they don't install a second furnace on top of the other new one. It's huge. But, I want them to see these other items. I can do that. Just make sure that before you make your final invoice, you come in here and activate everything so it shows up on the final invoice. But you can uncheck those kind of day by day, just to give your technicians sections of the job to do, just to make sure everything gets done. But I'm gonna leave mine active here because we're gonna build the last day next. Again, Nori goes through, completes the work. This won't be for December 2nd. He's gonna go finish it tomorrow. For the job fields, I would have him go ahead and start off by putting in work complete. You go ahead and add in your times and everything else. So he'd go out there, do that job, take more photos, do whatever forms and documents, and all that'll work the same way, same with the checklists. But when it comes down to invoicing, we're going to post work orders now. We're going to see work complete, ready to review. Now, this is where things can get tricky for a business. You might have a few people that need to look at this. I've seen companies that have, a service manager that want to look at it. They want the salesman to look at it. They want the payroll person to look at it. You got a lot of different people that might touch this job. In that case, what I'd recommend is you can come in here and you can filter down to your specific job type, installs or whatever, and start going through these. All the ones that were ongoing, let's get them out of here. We'll do our do not invoice and we'll post them to move them on to their next days. We'll kind of cut down the list, get rid of all our service calls and all that stuff. Or like I said, filter down to just installations or whatever job type you've chosen to identify. But I see ready to review. Maybe I'm just the dispatcher and I want to go in here and I just want to make sure nothing else needs done dispatching wise or scheduling wise. So I might look at the notes and say, okay, everything looks done. Everything's installed and good to go. Maybe I check my user defined fields or checklist here. I don't have any more dates on this job. If I needed a third day, hey, just go ahead and add it here. Great, you got another day, not a problem. You just repeat the previous process and do not invoice for this date and let that one roll up and so on. But I'm going to say we don't need any more days. We are done because Nori said we're done in the field. So I'm going to mark this as non-recurring. Now, maybe it's not my job to do the posting. What I would have them do is go into my job fields, you as the dispatcher, and you can have another job exception because you can change these from the office. So maybe the job is going to go through me as the dispatcher, and then it's going to go to Jack as the parts manager to make sure everything's left the warehouse and we're good. And then it's going to go to Josh for the check on payroll and the final invoice. I would make a job exception that says, Jack to review, since he's the next person in the line that needs to look at the install. And then me as the office person, I would switch this to Jack to review. And then I'd just save and close it. And then I know it's good to go. And then Jack can come in here and just look for ones that say Jack's name on it. He can review it and then he can make sure his stuff is good, maybe change times or whatever his portion is. And then he can go ahead and mark Josh to review, or however many times you guys need to do that process out there. And then whoever is the final person can do their final review and they can go ahead and post the work order. Now, we do have a question before I do that. Let's see. Stephanie said, Tech is adding his time in iFleet, or do we add this time after it's completed? The Tech adds the time in iFleet. I didn't want to bounce you guys back and forth between iFleet a whole bunch for the install process. But yeah, the Tech does all that from iFleet. I am going through here and pretending like they didn't add their times, and that's why I've been hitting add and like kind of adding in times, but all that happens from iFleet. You are, of course, free to manage it here from Smart Service, though. Okay, so we got that. So I can go ahead and hit post. I have my do not invoice unchecked. And I know this one's ready to review because it says, ready to invoice or whatever your job exception is that gives the positive outcome. We can go ahead and hit post. We want to make sure all our items are active, of course. We want to make sure there's no future dates on it. Looks great. We can go ahead and post it over. Then that's going to go ahead and create my work order. Oh, and it's going to tell me, hey, we didn't have those furnaces in. I didn't really restock before we did the webinar, but we can see our invoices over there. Again, if you use the group item, when you send it to the customer, it would just be the one header, but I can see this here. The other things you'll want to do at some point over here in Smart Service, either you can have this turned on post jobs to timesheet like I did, or you can go through our post timesheet screen, but you want to push those employee times to QuickBooks. They are also tied to the work order. Now that I've done that though, let's go ahead and look at what we've assembled. So inside of the job, I've got the invoice, I've got the estimate, and if we go over to our purchase orders, I've got the purchase order tied to that job. And if I were to go into under time, use weekly timesheet, and we search for Nori, I've got his times over here, and they're also attached to that job. So I've got everything that you guys need to do job costing over here in QuickBooks. And now is when you want to go ahead and start running those reports, adding billable services and stuff like that, adding your costs. Everything is now associated with that job record. In this case, Aberdeen Lisa, 1955. One last thing before we end today. When I see people trying to do job costing in QuickBooks, they get real confused because we inactivate the job upon posting. There's not really anything to be confused about. Let me show you why. If you come in here, you can still find that work order. It's just inactive. Now you can go to the customer and you can see all the details and stuff like that. Or if you go to reports, you can still select the job. But if I go to all, just to show you, we're going to have every single work order that we've ever done for Lisa in here, including 1955 with those things attached. If I come in here to do a report on it, I can just right click on it and I can access some of the reports from here, or I can go through the reporting section. Sometimes when you're trying to make adjustments to things that are inactivated, we'll see if it'll do it for the open balance report. It may not. Okay, so that one works fine. Sometimes it will ask you, hey, this is an inactive element. Do you want to reactivate it or do you want to use it once? You can just say use it once and it'll activate it just for that second for you to do the report or whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to add costs to it or something like that, that should trigger that same warning. But you can do it just once. You don't have to leave it active. I don't want you to have a massive list of everything that's active in QuickBooks because that's just a mess. But everything is now kind of sectioned off to this one work order so we can get some good job costing with our times considered, with our estimate versus our actual service here done. We can make sure everything looks correct. If you've been making change orders to sales orders along the way, you'll see those in here as well. But that's everything I had for you guys here today. Let's go ahead and head back over to our slides to finish up. So that was a lot, and there's a lot of different steps that are in that process there. And let me get that to go away there. There we go. So you got a lot of different things going on here. You can go check out smartservice.com/webinar. That's going to have more information as well as the recording of this video and the other webinars that I referenced throughout the process. Installs are a very big process. There's a lot of moving parts on your side. There's a lot of moving parts on our side as well. But we all have the common goal of getting things done, getting things tracked. If you use all of the features in Smart Service, it makes a really good package to make sure people are on the same page and make sure things are getting done. And more importantly, make sure things are getting documented properly. A lot of people miss out on an install or have an angry customer because things weren't documented and they can't back up what they're trying to say. That's a very important part of the process. For Mavis, you'll be able to get a copy of the webinar at smartservice.com/webinar. I'll go ahead and start uploading that probably today. It probably won't be done until tomorrow though. But check back at that website around this time. I should have a copy of that uploaded to YouTube for you to check out. smartservice.com/updates. That's going to be where we talk about the updates to the program and the different features that are coming out in those updates. So head over there. You'll see one here probably come January or so. Another video about what the next update is going to bring. And of course, smartservice.com/knowledge base. That's your online manual for smart service. Plenty of good information there. And if you want to talk to a trainer directly, you can get personalized training by calling that number at the bottom. I'm going to stick around for about 5-10 minutes here, just until questions stop coming in. I do want to answer a couple questions that are coming in here now, but I'm going to leave these slides up there, talk about some of these extra things you guys are asking about. All right, let's see what you got. So Debbie says, I have a tech that was able to put info in for the job, or put info in for the billing on a job that was not assigned to them. How does this happen? I can think of a couple of ways we could probably make it happen. They can't from iFleet like access other people's jobs, but if we maybe had it scheduled to them and we changed it or something like that, we could probably make that happen. I would say reach out to the support team. We'll do a little bit of a forensic analysis there and look at the job, and maybe I can tell you what happened or how they were able to access that job, but that's not an iFleet feature for sure. Let's see, when you do the additional dates and technicians, do we have to generate more than one work order? I think we asked that question earlier, Mavis, and we answered that one. It doesn't generate more than one work order. You can if you want, but the process that I showed you, if you watch the recording there, does not generate more than one work order. It generates a multi-day work order, but it's still one work order. It just lasts multiple days. It's a project, basically. Let's see. Stephanie says, I would love a webinar regarding profitability. There seems to be so much to learn. I'm glad. When you leave the webinar, you'll be given a survey. Survey, great, sure. But more importantly, tell me what you want to talk about. Maybe we can bring that up next month. We're going to let you guys kind of decide based on popularity. So if you share Stephanie's feeling that we should be talking about profitability some more, send that in to us. Let's get some votes on it, and we'll dedicate an hour to it. And then Debbie, the follow-up for your comment earlier about your technician. I would say ask the help desk, because again, I can't really see on your computer right now. But if we get one of our guys in there, we can take a look and kind of walk through it. And like I said, do a little forensic analysis and kind of figure out what might happen there for you. But we'll take a look at that together. And Stephanie, you are welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed the webinar. All right, so that took care of the questions that everybody had. I'll stick around for another few seconds here. If you're still writing in a question, go ahead. I've got time today. Ask away. Otherwise, I'll cap it off here around 3:10, just to get moving on here if nobody has anything else they want to talk about relating to installs. All right, looks like we wrapped it up on questions there. Folks, I thank you for joining me. Again, check out some of these links that you're seeing on screen. If you have any questions, we're here for you. You can reach out to the training department. We generally recommend 2 hours of training every 2 years to keep up on the latest and greatest enhancements. And yeah, that's pretty much everything we had for today. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.